a nice casual conversation about life and death. This life and death. I'd like to read a bit of the foreword for you just to give some context as to why we're having the kind of conversation that we are. As I was musing on Twilight after being away from it for so long and discussing the anniversary problem with friends, I started thinking about something I'd said before at signings and in interviews. You know, Bella has always gotten a lot of censure for getting rescued on multiple occasions, and people have complained about her being a typical damsel in distress. My answer to that has always been that Bella is a human in distress. A normal human being surrounded on all sides by people who are basically superheroes and supervillains. She's also been criticized for being too consumed with her love interest, as if that's somehow just a girl thing. But I've always maintained that it would have made no difference if the human were male and the vampire female. It's still the same story. Gender and species aside, Twilight has always been a story about the magic and obsession and frenzy of first love. So I thought to myself, well, what if I put that theory to the test? That might be fun. It turns out that there isn't much difference at all between a female human in love with a male vampire and a male human in love with a female vampire. And that's how Beau and Edith were born. The reason I bring that up is because I wanted to go into reading this book with that question. Does gender identity matter in a story like Twilight? How much does it matter? Unfortunately, I don't have much to say about the gender identity question because I'm one of those people who believes that gender identity and gender expression belong to you and can be expressed in whatever way feels the best to you. Beau and Edith, as they are in this book, are allowed to express and be who they are. That's it for me on that big question. For me, the big takeaways that I got specifically between Edward and Edith is Edward is soft boy romance incarnate, and Edith strikes me as like dommy mommy. Both of these things I am perfectly okay with. And now we get into some character grievances. Real briefly, this really doesn't matter. I want to talk about Archie's hair, Alice's gender bent equal. His hair is described as an extremely close shave, and it's permanently that way. And I started thinking to myself, wait, does their hair not grow back? Which like makes sense because they're dead technically, but also, I don't know, it just kind of bothered me that it was like, no, his hair will never grow back again. Their hair never grows. I don't know, it's such a silly little thing, but it genuinely bothered me. The next one is a bit bigger. I despise Royal's backstory. Royal is Rosalie's gender-bent counterpart. And I was kind of hoping that Royal's backstory would remain pretty similar to Rosalie's. Keep the tragedy. Keep how awful of an experience she had, but with Royal. That sort of stuff happens to men as well, and I feel like it would have been powerful to make Royal's backstory be as close to the exact same thing as Rosalie's. So I feel like that was a missed opportunity, but I can also understand why the changes happened. I just wish Royal's backstory were the same, in essence, as Rosalie's. Some more of the basic critiques that I have is society as a whole, you know, just a small thing, just a critique on society, is we can fall into the trap of portraying men and boys, including in fiction, as reduced to horn dogs. And to me, that is a very reductive viewpoint of men. They're complex beings because they're humans. And there were a couple of times in this book where it felt like the male friendships in this book we're reduced to that, which is unfortunate. Although it can be argued that the friendship with Jessica in the original Twilight is just as superficial, so maybe that actually works out and it's a good equal to each other. It's just a gripe that I have in general. There is a line in this book. Again, this is a very tiny gripe, but I'm sharing it with you anyway, because I feel like if I didn't, I wouldn't have much of a video. But this line feels very out of character for Beau's character. So Edith and Beau are in Beau's bed, and Beau says, "Right," I laughed, "like I could sleep with you here." "You do it all the time," she reminded me. "Not with you here," I disagreed, tightening my arm around her. "You have a point. So if you don't want to sleep, what do you want to do then?" And this is the line that I have a problem with. Honestly, a lot of things. None of them careful. If Beau is Bella simply as a boy, I don't think Bella would say a line like that. She's too self-conscious about that topic. And Beau is portrayed as equally self-conscious, especially about those kinds of topics. So it just felt out of character to me and felt like an unnecessary tidbit to throw in there. I, as an editor, would have removed it, but obviously I was not the editor. Alright, let's talk about the ending. I first read this book many years ago when it first came out. And when I reread it, I assumed that it was going to be a tit-for-tat recreation, remix of Twilight. I had completely forgotten about the ending. Life and Death, Twilight Reimagined, literally reimagines the Twilight saga as a standalone book. It tries to wrap up the loose ends. Beau becomes a vampire. He dies after Joss, James, attacks him. They're too late. Beau becomes a vampire. They have a funeral, the treaty with the werewolves is reinforced, and Edith and Beau start there forever. There's a funny little line at the end where they're talking about how this whole thing ended, and Edith says something like, "I can't imagine this ending any other way," which is a hee ha ha moment for the Twilight Saga fans because we know there's another ending and it existed before this one. And while I understand the desire to explore an alternate ending, had it been me making the decisions, I would have left that thought experiment in my drafts. The ending just felt rushed and silly, and honestly spoiled and soured a little bit of the experience for me. I was genuinely kind of hoping for it to be just Twilight again, but it wasn't. I can understand how some people would disagree with me. They're like, "Oh, I'm so glad that it was different." But for me, I'm like, oh. But also the fact that I completely forgot that the ending was totally different, I feel like says that I, at least, was not impressed by the ending. As a writer, I appreciate the thought experiment that this novel poses. It's an intriguing question to ask. How would my characters change if I swapped their genders? Would they change at all? Why or why not? Of course, these are the sorts of philosophical questions that I like to consider. So, as a thought experiment, love it. As a writer, love it. I think the question can really deepen character development and the choices that you make as an author. Despite the ending, that I was not expecting to be so different, I'd say all in all, the reading experience was a bit repetitive. Again, it's a remix of Twilight, just a gender-bent version. So, at the end of the day, in my large ranking of everything, this goes on the bottom because, yeah, it's fine, but ultimately pointless, especially if you prefer Twilight. Maybe you'll prefer the gender bent version. Maybe the improvements in technical writing skills are enough for you to think that Life and Death is so worth it, because that is nice. But also, at the end of the day, for me, it was just repetitive. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun YouTuber stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye! My voice doesn't work today. It's very echoey in here. Echo, echo, echo. My notes. I should make sure that I'm in frame. That's not right. After being away for what's his name? Oh, my eyeball. I'm going to deal with my eye before I continue the video. Okay, now that I've removed my mascara from my lower lashes, I'm not putting that in. Excuse me.